Welcome to a powerful story of love, loss, and healing. Rachel thought she had left the pain of losing her first love, Michael, behind until she crosses paths with his parents, Aaron and Donna. Together, they must confront their shared grief and rebuild their lives. But as old wounds resurface, will they find the strength to forgive and move forward? Join their journey to find out, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It was a crisp autumn morning in the town of Oakwood, a quiet place where the passing of time felt slower than in most other towns. The streets were lined with golden leaves that had fallen from the towering oak trees, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of the season through the air. At Maddie's Diner, the warm, inviting smell of sizzling bacon and fresh brewed coffee wafted out each time someone opened the door. Inside the diner, Rachel Parker sat alone at her favorite table, a cup of coffee cradled between her hands. The soft clinking of cutlery and the hum of casual conversations formed a comforting background noise as she gazed out the window. Rachel was in her mid-40s, with sharp but kind eyes and a quiet grace that came from years of navigating the ups and downs of life. She had built a small empire in Oakwood, 3 successful boutiques scattered across the town. But today, work was far from her mind. Her thoughts drifted as she watched the occasional passerby on the street. It had been a long week, and this was the first quiet moment she had allowed herself. Rachel's mind wandered back to her son, Ethan, who was away at college. She missed him more than she would ever admit, but at the same time, she was proud of the man he was becoming. She could feel the tightness in her chest ease as she sipped her coffee and enjoyed the peaceful solitude of the diner. But peace, like most things, was fleeting. The bell above the door chimed, and a gust of cold air rushed into the room as the door creaked open. The regulars didn't pay much attention. New faces were uncommon, but not unheard of, but Rachel noticed him immediately. An elderly man shuffled inside, his back bent from years of hard living, his clothes ragged and ill-fitting. His thinning white hair peeked out from under a worn cap, and his shoes were so worn that Rachel could see his toes poking through the fabric. He paused just inside the door, as if unsure whether he was welcome. The diner's patrons glanced at him, but quickly turned their attention back to their food. Rachel, however, couldn't look away. Something about the man tugged at her heart. He looked so lost. The man Aaron took a few slow, unsteady steps toward the counter, his hands shaking as he gripped a small collection of crumpled bills and coins. His eyes were cast downward, his shoulders hunched, as if he wanted to make himself invisible. The room, which had been filled with quiet chatter just moments before, seemed to fall into a heavy silence. Rachel could feel the shift in the air, and her heart ached for the man, though she didn't yet know why. Aaron reached the counter and placed his small handful of coins on the surface with trembling hands. The diner's owner, Linda, who prided herself on keeping a spotless establishment and a stern reputation, eyed him with thinly veiled contempt. She crossed her arms, her lips twisting into a scowl as she looked him up and down, making no attempt to hide her disdain. "What do you want, old man?" Linda snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the air. "This isn't a soup kitchen." Aaron's voice was barely a whisper as he spoke, the years of hardship weighing heavily on his words. Just the cheapest sandwich, ma'am. I have enough for that." Linda looked down at the coins he had placed on the counter, then back at Aaron. She scoffed, her expression hardening. "That's not enough for anything here. We don't serve people like you." Rachel watched the scene unfold, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the eyes of the other diners on Aaron, the silent judgment that filled the room. Some whispered to each other, their faces twisted in discomfort or amusement, but none of them moved to help. It was as if Aaron's presence had disturbed their comfortable little world, and they didn't want to be reminded of the harsher realities outside their bubble. A man at a nearby table, Tom, one of the regulars, chuckled under his breath. "Go on, old man," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Nobody wants you here." Aaron's face reddened, and he shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. His stomach growled loudly, a sound that seemed to echo in the quiet diner, and for a moment his eyes darted toward the door as if he was considering leaving. Rachel couldn't take it anymore. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup, and before she knew what she was doing, she was on her feet, crossing the room with long, purposeful strides. "Excuse me," Rachel said, her voice steady but firm as she approached the counter. All eyes turned to her, but she didn't flinch. "He'll pay for his meal." Linda looked at her with raised eyebrows, surprised by the interruption. "Rachel, you don't have to." "He'll pay for his meal," Rachel repeated, cutting Linda off. Her tone left no room for argument. Linda hesitated for a moment, then shrugged, her expression still sour. "Fine. But don't expect this to be a regular thing." Rachel turned to Aaron, her expression softening. "Please sit down. You'll have a sandwich in just a moment." Aaron blinked, his eyes wide with surprise. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Slowly he nodded and made his way to the nearest empty table. As he sat down, his hands trembled slightly, and Rachel could see the glimmer of tears in his eyes. The other patrons whispered among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with Rachel's act of kindness, but she ignored them. She watched as Linda prepared the sandwich grudgingly, but quickly set it down in front of Aaron with an air of annoyance. Aaron looked up at Rachel, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, I didn't expect anyone to." Rachel smiled gently. "It's no trouble at all. You deserve a good meal." For a moment, Aaron didn't move. He just stared at the sandwich in front of him, as if he couldn't believe it was real. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he picked it up and took a small bite. Rachel noticed that his hands still shook as he ate, his face filled with quiet relief. As Aaron ate, Rachel couldn't help but watch him closely. There was something about him that tugged at her heart, a sense of familiarity, though she couldn't place it. He was just an old man, broken by life, trying to survive, but there was something more. Something that Rachel felt deep inside her, like a faint echo of a memory long forgotten. It wasn't until Aaron lifted his hand to wipe his mouth that Rachel saw a glint of metal on his wrist, just barely visible under the frayed cuff of his sleeve. The watch. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the old, worn watch on Aaron's wrist. It was a simple timepiece, nothing fancy, but its design was unmistakable. Rachel felt her heart begin to race, her mind spinning as the memories came rushing back in a flood of emotions. She knew that watch. It was the same one she had given to Michael, the man she had once loved more than anything in the world, the man she had lost in a tragic accident so many years ago. Rachel felt dizzy, the room seeming to tilt around her as she tried to process what she was seeing. She hadn't thought about Michael in years, not really. She had tried to move on, to bury the pain and the memories, but seeing that watch brought everything back to the surface in an instant. Without thinking, Rachel stepped closer to Aaron's table, her eyes fixed on the watch. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "That watch, where did you get it?" Aaron looked up at her, confused by the intensity in her voice. He glanced down at his wrist, as if he had forgotten he was even wearing it. "Oh, this," he said softly, unbuckling the watch and holding it out for her to see. "It was a gift from my son." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "Your son?" Aaron nodded, his eyes clouded with sadness. "Yes. His name was Michael. He passed away many years ago." Rachel felt the world drop out from under her. The room seemed to close in around Rachel as she stood there, staring at the watch in Aaron's hands. The memories of Michael flooded her mind, his smile, his laughter, the way he had always made her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered. She had loved him deeply, and losing him had shattered her in ways she hadn't fully realized until now. She hadn't just lost Michael. She had lost a future, a life they had planned to build together. And now, standing before her, was the father of the man she had loved, the man whose death had left a wound in her heart that had never fully healed. Rachel swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. "I knew Michael," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I loved him." Aaron's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment he just stared at her. You knew my son?" Rachel nodded, her eyes filling with tears she hadn't expected. "We were in love. Before the accident, we were going to build a life together." Aaron's face crumpled, his own eyes glistening with tears. "I didn't know." He never told me about you. I didn't know." For a long moment, they just stood there, the weight of their shared grief hanging heavy between them. Rachel could feel the pain of Michael's loss, as if it had happened only yesterday, the sharp sting of it cutting through her like a blade. "I'm sorry," Aaron said softly, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." Rachel shook her head, wiping at her eyes. "No, you don't have to apologize. I never expected to meet you like this." Aaron nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of the years was pressing down on him. "After Michael died, everything fell apart. My wife, she blamed me. She blamed the world. And eventually we lost everything." Rachel's heart ached for him. She knew what it was like to lose everything, to have your life torn apart by tragedy. She had tried to rebuild after Michael's death, but some wounds never fully healed. "Where is your wife now?" Rachel asked gently. Aaron looked down, his voice barely a whisper. "She's still out there. We live on the streets now. She's in the park, not far from here." Rachel's chest tightened. She couldn't imagine the pain Aaron and his wife had gone through, the years of grief, the slow unraveling of their lives after losing Michael. And now here they were, barely surviving. "I want to help," Rachel said, her voice steady. "I can't bring Michael back, but I want to help you and your wife. Please, let me do that." Aaron looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You would do that, after all this time?" Rachel nodded, her heart filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. "Yes, it's the least I can do." The following day dawned cold and gray, with a light drizzle misting the streets of Oakwood. The sky seemed to mirror Rachel's own mood, heavy and unsettled. She couldn't stop thinking about Aaron and the heartbreaking truth he had revealed about his and Donna's lives since Michael's death. They had lost everything, and Rachel felt a deep responsibility to help them, even if it meant opening wounds she had spent years trying to close. She had offered to take Aaron back to the park to meet Donna. He had hesitated at first, not wanting to impose it, but Rachel was insistent. She wasn't sure what she was getting herself into, but she knew this was something she had to do for herself, for Aaron, and perhaps most of all, for Michael. Rachel pulled on a thick coat and grabbed an umbrella before heading to meet Aaron at the diner. He was waiting by the door, his posture slouched against the cold, a thin scarf wrapped around his neck. His eyes lit up with cautious hope when he saw her, and Rachel felt a pang of sadness. She couldn't imagine the life he had been living, barely surviving on the streets with Donna, all while carrying the weight of losing their only son. "You didn't have to come," Aaron said as she approached, his voice a mix of gratitude and guilt. "I wanted to," Rachel replied, her voice firm but kind. "Let's go see Donna." Together they made their way toward the small park a few blocks away. The walk was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Rachel tried to prepare herself for what was to come, but she knew there was no way to predict how Donna would react. Would she be angry, bitter? Or had the years of hardship softened her in ways Rachel couldn't imagine? When they reached the park, Rachel spotted Donna immediately. She was sitting on a worn bench beneath a large oak tree, her frail frame wrapped in a faded coat that barely shielded her from the elements. Her hair was gray and tied back in a loose bun, and her face was lined with deep wrinkles, far deeper than they should have been for her age. Donna stared blankly ahead, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular, lost in her own world. Rachel felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This woman had once been so proud, so rigid in her beliefs, and now she was sitting alone in a park, her life unraveling around her. It was hard to reconcile the Donna she remembered with the fragile figure before her. Aaron took a hesitant step forward. "Donna, it's me." Donna's eyes flickered with recognition, but her expression remained distant. She glanced at Aaron, then shifted her gaze to Rachel, her brow furrowing slightly as if trying to place her. "Who's this?" Donna asked, her voice hoarse from years of strain. "It's Rachel," Aaron said quietly. "Michael's Rachel." The name seemed to hang in the air, heavy and charged. Rachel could see the moment Donna's memory clicked into place, the way her eyes widened slightly and her lips tightened into a thin line. "Rachel," Donna repeated, her voice colder now. "You're the one who took him away." Rachel's heart sank as Donna's words hit her like a physical blow. She had known this moment would come, but hearing the accusation out loud still hurt more than she had expected. Aaron stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Donna, it wasn't her fault. Rachel had nothing to do with what happened." Donna ignored him, her gaze locked on Rachel with a mix of resentment and disbelief. "You took him away from us," she said again, her voice trembling with emotion. "He was our only son, and you were the reason he changed. The reason he left us." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She had never imagined that Donna would still carry so much anger after all these years, and now she didn't know what to say. How could she defend herself against grief so deep, so consuming? "I loved him," Rachel said softly, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling the leaves above them. "I loved Michael more than anything. I never wanted to take him away from you." Donna's eyes filled with tears, but her expression remained hardened. "You didn't understand what you were doing. He was all we had. He was supposed to stay with us, to build a life with someone who could give him everything." Rachel's chest tightened. She had heard this before, all those years ago. Donna had never approved of her, never thought she was good enough for Michael. And now, standing here, it seemed that nothing had changed. "I couldn't stop him from loving you," Donna continued, her voice rising. "But I knew it would only end in disaster. And then we lost him." "Donna, please," Aaron interjected, stepping closer to his wife. "Michael's death wasn't her fault. It wasn't anyone's fault." But Donna wasn't listening. She had spent too many years building up this narrative in her mind. Too many years convincing herself that Rachel was to blame for everything. It was the only way she had been able to survive the loss of her son. "I couldn't even look at you at his funeral," Donna said, her voice shaking. "I couldn't bear it. You took everything from me." Rachel felt the tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I lost him too, Donna. I lost him just like you did. And I've carried that pain with me every day since then." For the first time, Donna's expression faltered. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process Rachel's words, but the anger still simmered just beneath the surface. "You don't understand," Donna whispered. "You'll never understand." Aaron placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his voice soft and soothing. "Donna, we've all been through so much. But it's time to stop blaming each other. It's time to start healing." Donna sat back on the bench, her body trembling with the weight of her emotions. For so long, she had carried blame and resentment like a shield, protecting herself from the reality of her grief. But now, standing face to face with Rachel, the woman she had blamed for so many years, that shield was beginning to crack. "I don't know how to forgive," Donna whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how to let go." Rachel knelt down in front of her, her eyes filled with compassion. "It's not easy," she said softly. "I don't know if I've fully forgiven myself for what happened. But holding on to the blame, holding on to the anger, it's only hurting us more." Donna's tears finally spilled over, running down her weathered cheeks. She looked at Rachel, really looked at her, for the first time. "I've spent so many years hating you," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But now I don't even know why." Aaron knelt beside her, his hand still resting on her shoulder. "It's because it was easier," he said gently. "It was easier to hate than to face the pain." Rachel reached out, taking Donna's hand in hers. The gesture was small, but it was enough to bridge the gap between them. "I'm sorry," Rachel said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through. But we can't keep living like this. We can't keep tearing each other apart." Donna sobbed softly, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. "I don't know how to let go," she whispered again. "We'll figure it out together," Rachel promised. "We'll figure it out, one step at a time." After what felt like an eternity, Donna's sobs began to quiet, and the tension in the air started to ease. Aaron helped her stand, and they all made their way back to Rachel's car in silence. There was still a long road ahead, but the first step had been taken. Rachel drove them to her house, offering them a place to stay for the night. Aaron accepted gratefully, and Donna, though hesitant, didn't argue. They had been on the streets for so long that the thought of a warm bed and a hot meal was too much to refuse. Once they arrived, Rachel showed them to the guest room and made them comfortable. She could see the exhaustion etched into every line of their faces, the years of hardship weighing heavily on them both. "Thank you," Aaron said quietly, as Rachel handed him a fresh set of towels. "For everything." Rachel smiled softly. "It's the least I can do." "Your family." Aaron's eyes glistened with emotion, and he nodded. "We never thought we'd find peace again. But maybe now we can." As Aaron disappeared into the guest room, Rachel stood in the hallway, her mind racing. She had spent so many years carrying the weight of Michael's loss, the guilt and the pain of it all. But now, for the first time, she felt like there was a chance for something different. A chance to heal. She wasn't sure what the future would hold for Aaron and Donna, but she knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. The next morning the house was quiet, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains. Rachel stood in the kitchen making coffee, her thoughts still swirling from the events of the previous day. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew that the truce between her and Donna was fragile, delicate. It would take time to rebuild trust, if it could be rebuilt at all. As the coffee brewed, Rachel heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Aaron standing in the doorway, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "She's still sleeping," Aaron said quietly. "She didn't sleep much last night, but I think she's starting to come around." Rachel nodded, pouring a cup of coffee and handing it to Aaron. "It's going to take time," she said softly, "but we're on the right path." Aaron took the cup with a grateful smile, and they stood together in the kitchen, the silence between them filled with a sense of quiet understanding. "We couldn't have done this without you," Aaron said after a long pause. "You've given us something we thought we lost a long time ago." Rachel looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "We all needed this," she said gently. "Michael, he would want us to heal, to find peace." Aaron nodded, his eyes misty. "He would. I know he would." As the days passed, Rachel, Aaron, and Donna began to settle into a new routine. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, of old wounds resurfacing, but there was also hope. Donna was quieter, more reflective, but Rachel could see that the anger she had carried for so long was starting to fade. Aaron was a steady presence, always offering quiet words of encouragement and support. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, Rachel turned to Donna, her voice gentle but firm. "I want to help you find a place of your own," she said. "You deserve a fresh start." Donna looked at her, surprise flickering across her face. "You've already done so much." Rachel shook her head. "This isn't about me. It's about you and Aaron. You deserve a home, a place where you can rebuild your lives." Aaron smiled softly, his hand resting on Donna's. "It's time, Donna. It's time for us to start over." Donna's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of relief. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Rachel replied, her voice filled with warmth. "We're family now, and family takes care of each other." The weeks that followed were marked by a quiet but steady shift in the atmosphere around Rachel's home. Donna, once a figure of bitterness and pain, was slowly transforming. It wasn't a quick process, healing never was, but there were small signs that something within her was beginning to change. Her anger, which had once been her constant companion, seemed to be softening, and in its place, a fragile hope was starting to emerge. Rachel found herself watching Donna closely during this time, looking for any small indicators of progress. It was in the way Donna's posture had begun to straighten just a little, the way she no longer flinched at every kind gesture. There were moments of quiet conversation between the two women, moments that hinted at a growing understanding between them. Aaron, always the steady presence, remained a comforting figure for both Rachel and Donna. His quiet wisdom and gentle words helped ease the tension in the house. Rachel often marveled at how, despite his own grief and struggles, Aaron had managed to maintain a sense of calm that seemed to radiate outward. It was as if he had accepted that life would never be the same. But that didn't mean it couldn't still be beautiful. One afternoon, Rachel and Aaron sat together in the living room, a soft fire crackling in the hearth. Donna was in the kitchen, quietly making tea, something she had started doing more frequently, as if the simple act of preparing a warm drink was her way of reclaiming some control over her life. "She's different now," Rachel remarked quietly, her gaze drifting toward the kitchen. "It's like the anger is finally fading." Aaron nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "She's still struggling, but I think, for the first time in a long time, she sees that there's a way forward." Rachel sighed, leaning back into the soft cushions of the couch. "I just want to help her find peace. After everything she's been through, everything we've all been through, she deserves that." Aaron's eyes softened. "You've done more for us than you know, Rachel." "Donna, she may not say it, but I see it in her eyes. She's grateful." Rachel felt a lump form in her throat. "I just wish I could have done more. So much time has passed, and I feel like we've all been stuck in this cycle of pain." Aaron reached over, gently placing his hand on hers. "What matters is that we're moving forward now. It doesn't matter how long it took. What matters is that we're here." As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that Aaron and Donna needed a place of their own. They had stayed with Rachel for nearly a month, but it was time for them to start building a life again, a life outside the shadows of their past. Rachel had suggested it gently one evening over dinner. "Have you thought about where you want to live next?" she had asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Aaron and Donna had exchanged a glance, and for the first time, Donna didn't shy away from the idea. She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. "We've talked about it," she admitted. It's time." Rachel smiled, relieved to hear Donna's words. "I'll help you find a place. Something small, something comfortable." The search began the following day. Rachel spent hours scouring listings for small, affordable houses in Oakwood. It wasn't easy. Aaron and Donna had very little in terms of savings, having spent years on the streets, but Rachel was determined to help them find something that would give them the fresh start they deserved. They visited several houses over the course of a week, but none of them felt quite right. Some were too cramped, others were in need of too many repairs. Rachel could see the discouragement starting to creep back into Donna's expression after each unsuccessful visit, and she worried that they might not find what they were looking for. It wasn't until they visited a small on-a-story house near the edge of town that something clicked. The house was modest, with white shutters and a small front porch. The yard was overgrown, but Rachel could already picture Donna tending to it, planting flowers, and restoring it to its former beauty. Inside, the house was cozy but not cramped, with just enough space for Aaron and Donna to live comfortably. The living room had a large window that let in plenty of natural light, and the kitchen, though small, was charming in its simplicity. As they toured the house, Rachel could see the change in Donna's eyes. She wasn't saying much, but her fingers trailed along the walls, and her gaze lingered on the little details: the fireplace, the view of the backyard, the way the sunlight filtered through the curtains. Aaron stood in the doorway of the living room, watching Donna closely. "What do you think?" he asked gently, his voice filled with cautious hope. Donna turned to him, her eyes soft. It feels like home." The process of securing the house took longer than Rachel had hoped, but after a few weeks of back and forth with the landlord, they finally had the keys. Aaron and Donna were officially moving into their new home. The morning of the move was brisk but bright, with the crisp autumn air carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Ethan, who had returned home from college for the weekend, had offered to help with the move, and Rachel was grateful for the extra pair of hands. Together, they packed up the few belongings Aaron and Donna had accumulated during their time at Rachel's house. Most of what they had were donations from kind-hearted neighbors, but there were a few personal items that had survived the year's family photos, the mementos of Michael, and, of course, the watch. By mid-afternoon, the small moving truck was loaded, and they set off for the new house. As they pulled up to the driveway, Donna looked out the window with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. She had been quiet on the ride over, her emotions carefully guarded, but now, as they stood on the threshold of their new life, Rachel could see the anticipation in her eyes. "We're here," Aaron said softly, his hand resting on Donna's arm. Donna nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened the car door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the house as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Rachel smiled and walked over to her. "Welcome home." The first night in their new home was a quiet one, filled with the sounds of unpacking and the occasional laughter as they found places for each item. Donna had insisted on making dinner, even though the kitchen was still in the process of being organized. She had always found comfort in cooking, and Rachel could see that it was helping her settle into space. As they sat around the small kitchen table eating a simple meal of soup and bread, Rachel looked around at the faces of the people she had come to love. Aaron, sitting beside Donna, looked more at peace than he had in years. There was lightness to him now, a sense of relief that they had finally found a place to call their own. Ethan, always the calming presence, chatted easily with Aaron about his studies and plans for the future. He had grown so much in the past few years, and Rachel couldn't have been prouder of the man he was becoming. But it was Donna's transformation that struck Rachel the most. She was still quiet, still reserved, but there was softness to her now, a sense that the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crumble. The bitterness that had once defined her was fading, replaced by a cautious optimism that Rachel hadn't seen in her before. After dinner, as the sun set and the last boxes were unpacked, Rachel stood on the front porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Donna joined her a few moments later, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "It feels good to be here," Donna said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel smiled, her gaze still on the horizon. "You deserve this, Donna. You and Aaron both." Donna nodded, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "It's hard to let go of the past. Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying Michael by moving on." Rachel turned to her, her expression gentle. "You're not betraying him. You're honoring him by finding happiness again. I think he would want that." Donna's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Do you really think so?" Rachel reached out, placing a comforting hand on Donna's arm. "I know so." They stood together in the fading light, the weight of the past slowly lifting as they faced the future together. Over the next few months, Aaron and Donna settled into their new life with surprising ease. The little house became a home, filled with warmth and laughter, and Rachel visited often, always eager to see how they were doing. Donna had taken to gardening, just as Rachel had predicted, and the once overgrown yard was now filled with colorful flowers and neatly trimmed hedges. It was a labor of love, and each day Donna seemed to grow more comfortable in her new role as a caretaker of the garden and of her own life. Aaron, too, was thriving. He had reconnected with old friends in town, and there were days when Rachel would stop by and find him sitting on the porch, deep in conversation with a neighbor or reading a book in the sunlight. The years of hardship had left their mark, but they hadn't broken him. If anything, they had made him stronger. One weekend, Ethan came home from college for a visit, bringing along his girlfriend, Sophie, whom Rachel had met a few months earlier. They all gathered at Aaron and Donna's house for a barbecue, the scent of grilling food filling the air as they laughed and shared stories. It was during one of these visits that Donna approached Rachel, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about Michael a lot lately," Donna admitted, as they stood in the kitchen, preparing food together. Rachel nodded, her heart aching at the mention of his name. "Me too. I feel like I've finally forgiven myself," Donna said softly. "For everything. For how I treated you. For how I handled losing him. It's taken a long time, but I think I'm ready to let go." Rachel placed a hand on Donna's shoulder, her voice filled with warmth. "I'm proud of you, Donna. Michael would be too." Donna smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you, Rachel. For everything." Life continued to move forward, each day bringing with it small moments of peace and happiness. Aaron and Donna had found their place in the world again, and though the memories of Michael were never far from their minds, they no longer held them back. Instead, those memories had become a source of strength, a reminder of the love that had once connected them all. One evening, as Rachel sat with Aaron and Donna on their front porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a sense of contentment she hadn't felt in years. They had come so far, all of them, and though the road had been difficult, they had made it through together. "I think we're going to be okay," Donna said quietly, her voice steady and sure. Rachel smiled, her heart full. "I know we are." The holiday season was approaching, and Oakwood was bustling with festive energy. The town square had been strung with twinkling lights, and storefronts were adorned with wreaths and holiday displays. It had been nearly a year since Aaron and Donna moved into their new home, and in that time, their lives had transformed in ways none of them could have predicted. Rachel, as she had for months now, made regular visits to Aaron and Donna's house, checking in on them, spending evenings talking over tea, and simply enjoying the peace they had all worked so hard to create. But today, something was different. There was a quiet excitement in the air, one that Rachel couldn't quite place. Ethan had called earlier in the week, saying he would be coming home for the holidays, and he had a surprise. Rachel, curious but patient, waited eagerly for his arrival. The day Ethan arrived, the house was alive with warmth. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a golden glow over the room, and the smell of freshly baked cookies filled the air. Rachel stood at the kitchen counter, carefully arranging a tray of snacks, while Aaron and Donna chatted quietly by the window. Their fingers intertwined, a simple but powerful sign of the closeness they had found again after so many years of distance. When the doorbell rang, Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and hurried to the door, excitement bubbling in her chest. Ethan stood there, tall and handsome as ever, his bright smile lighting up the chilly December day. But it wasn't just Ethan who made Rachel's breath catch. Standing beside him was Sophie, the young woman he had introduced to the family earlier that year. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice filled with warmth, "I wanted to tell you something in person." Sophie smiled shyly, her hand resting in Ethan's. Rachel's eyes darted between them, her curiosity growing by the second. "What is it?" she asked, though the gleam in Ethan's eyes already hinted at what was coming. Ethan took a deep breath, his smile growing even wider. "Sophie and I were engaged." For a moment, time seemed to stop. Rachel's heart swelled with joy, and her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "Oh, Ethan," she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I'm so happy for you." Sophie, blushing but beaming with joy, was next in line for Rachel's hug. "Thank you, Mrs. Parker," she said softly, her eyes shimmering. "Please, call me Rachel," she replied warmly, her voice thick with emotion. "You're family now." Aaron and Donna, who had been listening from the living room, came forward to offer their congratulations, their own faces glowing with happiness. The news brought a new kind of light into their home, one filled with the promise of future joy and the continuation of love. Over the next few weeks, the house buzzed with wedding plans. Ethan and Sophie were eager to start their new life together, and Rachel threw herself into helping them plan their special day. It was the first time in years that Rachel felt such pure, unbridled joy. Watching her son prepare to marry the love of his life was a gift she hadn't expected, but one she cherished deeply. Aaron and Donna were equally involved. Donna, in particular, seemed to flourish in her role as part of the planning process. She offered advice on flower arrangements, shared family traditions, and even helped Sophie pick out her wedding dress. Rachel noticed how Donna seemed lighter these days, as if the burden she had carried for so long was finally lifting. "I never thought I'd be helping plan a wedding again," Donna remarked one evening, as she and Rachel sat together, sipping tea in the living room. Rachel smiled, her heart full. "It's wonderful, isn't it?" Donna nodded, her eyes distant but soft. "I never thought I'd have this chance, not after losing Michael. But now I feel like we've all been given a second chance." Rachel reached over, placing a comforting hand on Donna's. "We have," she said quietly. "We really have." As the weeks passed, the excitement surrounding the wedding grew. The small town of Oakwood, with its close-knit community, was abuzz with news of Ethan and Sophie's engagement. Everyone knew Rachel's story, knew the tragedy she had faced in losing Michael, and now they marveled at the way life had come full circle. The wedding was to be a celebration not only of Ethan and Sophie's love, but of the resilience and strength that had brought Rachel, Aaron, and Donna to this moment. But as the wedding day approached, Rachel found herself thinking more and more about Michael. The memories of him, once so painful and sharp, had softened over time, but they still lingered in the corners of her heart. As she watched Ethan and Sophie prepare for their future, she couldn't help but wonder what her life might have been like if Michael had survived. Would they have gotten married, had children together? One afternoon, while Rachel was sorting through some old photo albums in preparation for the wedding, she came across a small faded picture of herself and Michael. It had been taken on a summer day, years ago, when they had been so full of hope and love. The sight of his smile, so familiar and yet so distant, made her heart ache. Rachel sat down on the edge of her bed, holding the photo in her hands. She traced the outline of his face with her fingers, tears welling in her eyes. "I miss you, Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I wish you could be here." The weight of her grief, though lighter now, was still there. But as Rachel sat with the photo, something shifted inside her. She realized that Michael's absence didn't diminish the love she had for him, nor did it take away from the life she had built since his death. In fact, it was his memory that had brought her, Aaron and Donna together, had allowed them to heal and find a new kind of happiness. And as Rachel wiped away her tears, she smiled, knowing that Michael would have been happy to see the life she had built, the family she had found. The wedding day arrived on a crisp, sunny morning in late spring. The Parker family home was bustling with activity, as friends and relatives gathered to celebrate Ethan and Sophie's union. Rachel had spent the morning helping Sophie get ready, her heart swelling with pride as she watched her soon-to-be daughter-in-law transform into a beautiful bride. Donna, standing nearby, offered quiet words of encouragement as Sophie nervously adjusted her veil. Aaron was outside with Ethan, sharing a fatherly conversation about marriage, love, and the future. Though Ethan had lost his biological father years ago, Aaron had stepped into that role with grace and love, and their bond had only grown stronger over time. As the ceremony began, Rachel stood beside Aaron and Donna, her heart full to bursting. She watched as Ethan and Sophie exchanged their vows, their voices steady but filled with emotion. The love between them was palpable, and Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over her. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, and the crowd erupted in cheers, Rachel's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pure joy. This was the life she had fought so hard to build, the life she had earned through love, loss, and healing. And now, standing with Aaron and Donna by her side, she knew that they had all found their way to a place of peace. In the weeks that followed the wedding, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ethan and Sophie had moved into their own home, not far from Rachel's, and the family continued to grow closer with each passing day. Aaron and Donna's little house had become a gathering place for the family, and it wasn't uncommon for Rachel, Ethan, and Sophie to stop by for dinner or simply to spend time together. One evening, as they all sat together in the garden, watching the sun set over the horizon, Rachel felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years. The pain of losing Michael would always be a part of her, but it no longer controlled her life. Instead, it had become a part of her story, a story that was still unfolding, filled with love, hope, and new beginnings. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Donna turned to Rachel, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I never thought we'd get here," she said softly. Rachel smiled, her heart full. "Neither did I." Aaron, who had been listening quietly, nodded. "But we did, and that's what matters." Together, they sat in the fading light, surrounded by the love and peace they had all worked so hard to find. It had been a long and difficult journey, but they had made it through together. And as Rachel looked around at her family, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it with open hearts, knowing that love, in all its forms, would always guide them home. Months passed, and life continued to unfold in its quiet, beautiful way. Ethan and Sophie built their new life together, creating their own memories and traditions. Aaron and Donna found joy in the simple pleasures of life, gardening, hosting family dinners, and spending time with their newfound family. But no matter how much time passed, Michael's memory remained a constant presence. It wasn't a source of sadness anymore, but a reminder of the love that had connected them all and brought them to this place of peace. As Rachel sat in her garden one sunny afternoon, Sipping tea and watching the flowers sway gently in the breeze, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The road she had traveled had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of healing. And as she looked around at the life she had built, she knew that Michael was with her in every laugh, every shared meal, every quiet moment of joy. He had been her first love, but the family she had found in Aaron, Donna, Ethan, and Sophie was a testament to the fact that love, in all its forms, was the greatest gift of all. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Rachel smiled, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks after Ethan and Sophie's wedding were marked by a quiet sense of transition. While the ceremony had been a celebration of love and commitment, the real work of marriage had only just begun. Ethan and Sophie had moved into their new home, an old craftsman-style house on the edge of Oakwood, and they were busy setting up their life together. They spent their days organizing rooms, hanging pictures, and planning out their shared future. Rachel, though no longer involved in the daily grind of wedding planning, found herself frequently checking in on her son and new daughter-in-law. She marveled at how naturally Ethan had taken to his new role as a husband, how deeply he loved Sophie, and how dedicated he was to building a life of stability and happiness for them both. But despite the happiness that surrounded Ethan and Sophie's new life, Rachel couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in her own. For years, Ethan had been the center of her world, the person she had focused all her energy and love on. With him now starting a family of his own, Rachel was left to contemplate the new space that had opened up in her life. One afternoon, as she sat on her front porch with a cup of tea, Rachel found herself reflecting on the quiet that had settled over her home. It wasn't an unpleasant quiet, far from it, but it was different, and she wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. The busyness of the past year, the emotional highs and lows, had kept her moving forward. Now, for the first time in a long while, she was able to stop and simply breathe. Aaron and Donna had adjusted beautifully to their new roles as grandparents in waiting, so to speak. Though there was no talk of children just yet, the possibility hung in the air like a sweet promise. Rachel often visited them at their cozy home, where the small garden that Donna had so lovingly tended was now blooming with vibrant colors. Life had become a gentle rhythm of shared meals, quiet conversations, and the warmth of a family that had been rebuilt from the ashes of the past. But as the days passed, Rachel began to wonder what her own future would hold. She had spent so much time helping others heal, helping Aaron and Donna find their way back to life after Michael, helping Ethan find his path to love. But now she realized it was her turn to figure out what she wanted. What would life look like for her now that the roles she had so carefully crafted were beginning to shift? As the weeks stretched into months, Rachel found herself more and more drawn to the idea of rediscovery. She had spent so many years as a mother, a caretaker, and a friend that she had nearly forgotten who she was outside of those roles. But now, with Ethan happily married and Aaron and Donna flourishing in their new lives, Rachel had the time and the space to think about what she wanted for herself. One crisp morning, Rachel found herself standing in front of the old boutique she had once owned in downtown Oakwood. The building had been empty for some time, its windows dark and its interior quiet. As she stared at the familiar storefront, memories of the years she had spent running her boutique flooded her mind. She had loved that life, loved the creativity, the challenge of running a business, and the joy of helping her customers find something special. Rachel had given up the boutique after Michael's death, when her grief had consumed her and left little room for anything else. But now, standing there in the quiet morning light, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, a desire to create again, to build something of her own. Without overthinking it, Rachel reached out to the realtor who managed the property. Within a few days, she had signed a lease on space, and the wheels of a new adventure were set in motion. The decision wasn't an easy one. There were moments of doubt, of wondering if she was too old to start over, if she had the energy to dive back into the world of business. But with each passing day, the excitement grew, and soon enough, the boutique Rachel's Boutique was being prepared for its grand reopening. Rachel spent her days choosing new inventory, redesigning the store's layout, and reconnecting with old suppliers. She threw herself into the project with the same determination she had always had. And for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was rediscovering a part of herself that had been dormant for too long. Throughout the process, Aaron, Donna, Ethan, and Sophie rallied around Rachel, offering their support and encouragement. Aaron, ever the handyman, spent weekends helping Rachel repaint the walls and fix up the store's lighting. Donna offered her impeccable taste, suggesting color schemes and helping Rachel pick out elegant displays for the merchandise. Even Ethan, despite his busy schedule, made time to stop by and help with the heavy lifting, was always eager to lend a hand. Sophie, too, was a frequent visitor to the boutique. As someone with a keen sense of fashion and a love for all things creative, Sophie had become an invaluable part of Rachel's life. She helped with everything from inventory management to social media promotion, bringing youthful energy to the project that Rachel found infectious. One evening, after a long day of preparing the store, Rachel invited everyone back to her house for dinner. As they gathered around the table, laughter and conversation filling the air, Rachel felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This was the life she had always wanted, not one free of hardship, but one filled with love, connection, and purpose. "I can't believe the grand opening is just a week away," Rachel remarked, her voice filled with excitement. "It feels like everything's finally coming together." "You've worked so hard for this, Mom," Ethan said, his eyes filled with pride. "You deserve it." Donna smiled softly from across the table. "You've given us so much, Rachel. It's wonderful to see you doing something for yourself." Rachel felt her heart swell with warmth. "I couldn't have done any of this without all of you." Aaron raised his glass, a smile playing on his lips. "To new beginnings." The others joined in, clinking their glasses together in celebration of the journey they had all taken, both separately and together. The day of the grand opening dawned bright and clear, the sky a brilliant blue above the bustling town of Oakwood. Rachel stood outside her newly refurbished boutique, a sign reading "Rachel's Boutique Grand Reopening" hanging proudly above the door. The windows sparkled in the morning sun, and inside, the shelves were filled with beautiful hand-selected items that Rachel had spent weeks curating. As customers began to trickle in, Rachel felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. She had spent so long preparing for this moment, and now, here it was, her second chance at doing what she loved. The first few hours were a blur of activity. Old customers from years past stopped by to say hello, marveling at how the store had changed, while new faces wandered in, drawn by the excitement of a reopening. Rachel greeted each person with a smile, her heart full as she watched the boutique come alive once again. Aaron and Donna arrived mid-morning, their eyes lighting up as they walked through the doors. Donna immediately gravitated toward a display of scarves, her fingers tracing the delicate fabric with admiration. "This is beautiful, Rachel," Donna said softly, her eyes filled with pride. "You've really outdone yourself." Rachel smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for the friendship they had built. "Thank you, Donna. I'm just so happy to have everyone here." As the day wore on, the boutique buzzed with activity. Ethan and Sophie arrived in the afternoon, helping to manage the influx of customers and offering their own words of encouragement. It was a day of celebration, of new beginnings, and Rachel couldn't have asked for anything more. By the time the evening rolled around and the last customer had left, Rachel stood in the middle of her boutique, taking it all in. The store had exceeded her expectations, and more than that, it had given her a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she was missing. She locked the door and stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. As she turned to head home, she found Aaron and Donna waiting for her, their faces glowing with pride. "You did it," Aaron said, his voice filled with warmth. "You really did it." Rachel smiled, her heart full. "We did it." In the months following the grand opening, Rachel's boutique became a beloved fixture in Oakwood once again. Business flourished, and Rachel found herself reconnecting with old friends and making new ones along the way. Her days were filled with creativity, laughter, and a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't felt in years. Ethan and Sophie continued to build their life together, their love growing stronger with each passing day. Aaron and Donna, too, found peace in their quiet life, their days spent tending to their garden and enjoying the simple pleasures of their new reality. One sunny afternoon, Rachel invited everyone to her house for a small family gathering. As they sat in the backyard, the sun shining down on them and the sound of birds chirping in the distance, Rachel felt a deep sense of contentment. They had all come so far from the depths of grief and loss to a place of healing and love. The road had been long and the journey had been difficult, but they had found their way through together. As the conversation flowed around her, Rachel glanced over at Aaron and Donna, who were sitting side by side, their hands intertwined. They had found peace, just as she had, and together they had built something beautiful. Rachel smiled to herself, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it as a family, united by love, strengthened by forgiveness, and always moving forward with hope. As the autumn leaves began to fall, Oakwood found itself wrapped in the cozy embrace of another approaching holiday season. For the first time in years, Rachel felt a deep sense of excitement about the holidays. This year it wasn't just her and Ethan at home, but a much larger and growing family. With Aaron, Donna, Sophie, and now Sophie's parents joining the fold, their once quiet family gatherings had blossomed into lively celebrations filled with love and laughter. One brisk afternoon, Rachel stood at the counter in her kitchen, carefully rolling out pie dough. She had decided to host Thanksgiving this year, a decision that filled her with both joy and a hint of nervousness. It was the first time she'd had so many people under her roof for a holiday dinner, and she wanted everything to be perfect. As Rachel worked, she could hear the soft chatter of Sophie and Donna in the living room. The two women had become incredibly close over the past months, with Donna viewing Sophie as the daughter she never had. Their bond had blossomed naturally, and Rachel often found herself marveling at how far Donna had come. The woman who had once been so guarded and bitter now radiated warmth and generosity, as though the years of grief had finally given way to peace. Rachel paused for a moment, looking toward the living room with a soft smile. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, knowing that her life had evolved in ways she couldn't have imagined. They had all experienced so much loss, but together they built something new, something beautiful. Ethan entered the kitchen just then, his hair slightly tousled from the crisp autumn breeze. "Mom, do you need any help with the pies?" he asked, leaning over the counter to steal a quick bite of apple filling. Rachel swatted his hand playfully, laughing. "You'll ruin your appetite if you keep sneaking bites like that." Ethan grinned, unrepentant. "I'm pretty sure nothing could ruin my appetite today." Rachel shook her head, her heart full. She handed him a second pie tin and motioned for him to help her finish. "Why don't you make yourself useful and take this to the oven?" Ethan obeyed, sliding the pie into the preheated oven with ease. As he closed the door, he turned to his mother with a more serious expression. "You've done a great job, Mom. This is going to be a Thanksgiving to remember." Rachel felt her chest tighten with emotion. "It already is," she said softly, looking around at the cozy house filled with family and warmth. "I never thought I'd have this again." "You've made it happen," Ethan said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've been the glue that's held us all together." The Thanksgiving dinner was everything Rachel had hoped it would be. The house was filled with the smell of roasting turkey, freshly baked bread, and the rich spices of pumpkin pie. Aaron and Donna arrived early, bringing with them a homemade stuffing and a bottle of wine, and Sophie's parents, Matt and Ellen, came bearing a fresh-baked apple pie. As the evening unfolded, the house buzzed with laughter and conversation. The living room was a whirl of activity, with Ethan and Sophie setting the table, and Donna and Sophie's mother chatting excitedly about the coming Christmas season. It felt like a real family gathering, a far cry from the quiet, somber holidays Rachel had known in the years after Michael's death. During dinner, as the family gathered around the table, Ethan stood and raised his glass. "I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This year has been full of changes, good changes, and I know we wouldn't be here without the love and support we've given each other. The table grew quiet as Ethan continued. To Mom, who has always been there for me, even when things were tough. To Aaron and Donna, for being the best second set of parents I could ever ask for. And to Sophie, me, beautiful wife, for making every day feel like a gift. Tears shimmered in Rachel's eyes as Ethan's words sank in. She glanced around the table at the faces of the people she had come to love so deeply. And for the first time in years, she felt whole. Here's to family, Ethan finished, raising his glass higher. To family, everyone echoed, clinking their glasses together in a toast that carried more meaning than words could express. Later that evening, after the dinner dishes had been cleared and the pie had been served, Rachel found herself sitting beside Donna in the living room. The others were still gathered around the table, chatting and laughing, but Donna had quietly excused herself, and Rachel followed, sensing that there was something on her mind. Donna sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes distant as she gazed at the fire crackling in the hearth. Rachel sat down next to her, offering a gentle smile. "Are you okay?" Donna nodded slowly, but her eyes were misty. "I've been thinking about Michael a lot lately," she admitted softly. "I always do around the holidays. It's hard not to." Rachel's heart squeezed. She knew exactly how Donna felt. The holidays, with all their joy and celebration, had a way of bringing the weight of loss to the surface. But even though Michael was physically there, his presence lingered in the hearts of everyone who had loved him. "I think about him too," Rachel said, her voice tender. "Especially now, seeing Ethan so happy with Sophie. I can't help but wonder what life would have been like if Michael were still here." Donna turned to Rachel, her expression softening. "You loved him deeply," she said, her voice filled with understanding. "I can see that now. For so long, I blamed you for what happened, but the truth is, it wasn't anyone's fault. I know that now." Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. Donna's words carried so much weight, years of pain, guilt, and misunderstanding finally being lifted. "I loved him with all my heart," Rachel whispered, "but I never wanted to come between him and you." "I know," Donna said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I see that now. And I'm sorry, Rachel, for everything. I've spent so many years carrying anger and blame, but it's time I let it go." Rachel reached out, taking Donna's hand in hers. "We've all been through so much, but we're here now. We've found our way through." Donna nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Thank you. For everything. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you." Rachel squeezed her hand gently. "We wouldn't be here without each other." As winter settled over Oakwood, the town became a picturesque landscape of snow-covered rooftops and twinkling holiday lights. The Parker family had always loved the winter season, but this year, the holidays felt even more special. They had spent the past year rebuilding their lives, rediscovering their sense of purpose, and strengthening the bonds that had brought them together. As the new year approached, Rachel found herself reflecting on all that had happened. The reopening of her boutique had been a tremendous success, and she had fully settled back into the rhythm of running her own business. The store had become a beloved part of the community again, and Rachel often marveled at how life had come full circle. But there was something else stirring in Rachel's heart, something that she hadn't acknowledged until recently. With Ethan and Sophie now settled into their own lives, and with Aaron and Donna flourishing in their new roles as grandparents in waiting, Rachel realized that she too was ready for something new. One cold January morning, as the first snowflakes of the new year began to fall, Rachel found herself standing in front of the town's community center. She had driven by it countless times, but today something had drawn her to stop. She had always been passionate about giving back to the community. And now, with her life in such a good place, she felt compelled to find a way to help others who had gone through struggles of their own. Inside the community center, Rachel met with the director, a kind woman named Lisa, who ran several outreach programs for families in need. As they talked, Rachel felt a spark of excitement. There was so much she could do, whether it was through her boutique, offering employment opportunities, or simply volunteering her time. By the end of the meeting, Rachel had signed up to volunteer for a mentorship program for young women who were struggling to rebuild their lives after hardship. It was the perfect way to channel her own experiences into something positive. and Rachel felt a sense of fulfillment knowing that she could give back. As she walked back to her car, the cold air biting at her cheeks, Rachel smiled. The new year had brought with it new opportunities, and she was ready to embrace them fully. Over the next few months, Rachel threw herself into her new role at the community center. She spent her mornings at the boutique, continuing to build her business, and her afternoons mentoring young women who were navigating difficult times in their lives. It was rewarding work, and every day Rachel was reminded of just how far she had come. The mentorship program also gave Rachel the chance to reflect on her own journey. As she listened to the stories of the women she mentored, stories of loss, heartbreak, and resilience, she found herself sharing her own experiences in ways she hadn't before. She talked about losing Michael, about the years she had spent trying to heal, and about how both the love she had for Michael and the love she had found with her family had helped her rebuild her life. One spring afternoon, as Rachel finished a mentoring session, she walked outside to find Aaron waiting for her by car. He had come to pick her up for a family dinner at their house, and as they drove through the quiet streets of Oakwood, Rachel felt a sense of contentment settle over her. "I'm proud of you," Aaron said softly as they pulled into the driveway. "You found a way to take everything you've been through and turn it into something beautiful." Rachel smiled, her heart full. "We all have. I wouldn't be here without you, Donna and Ethan." Aaron nodded, his eyes warm. "We've built something special. Michael's legacy lives on, not just in the memories we have of him, but in the love we share with each other." Rachel blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the truth of Aaron's words. "You're right. His love brought us together, and it's what keeps us moving forward." As they stepped inside the house, where the smell of dinner wafted through the air and the sounds of laughter filled the room, Rachel knew that they had truly found their way home. The pain of the past would always be a part of them, but it no longer defined them. They had built a new legacy, a legacy of love, resilience, and family. And as they sat down to dinner, surrounded by the people they loved, Rachel smiled, knowing that they had finally found the peace they had all been searching for. If you've enjoyed following this heartfelt journey of love, healing, and second chances, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more uplifting stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this story with friends and family who need a reminder that hope and love can bring us through even the darkest times. Stay tuned for more inspiring content. But instead, the house next door had fallen into an eerie silence. Derek's car was still parked in the driveway, but there was no sign of him. It was as though he had retreated into the house, stewing in his anger, waiting for the right moment to strike. Edith knew she couldn't let her guard down. Derek was dangerous. She had seen it in his eyes, felt it in the way he had looked at her that day. She didn't trust his silence. He was planning something. She was sure of it. On the third morning after Rachel's escape, Edith woke to the sound of a loud bang. Her heart leapt into her throat as she bolted upright in bed, her mind racing with panic. For a moment, she was frozen, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of the noise. Then, another bang, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Edith's blood ran cold. The noise was coming from downstairs. She scrambled out of bed, her hands trembling as she pulled on her robe and hurried to the door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tiptoed down the stairs, her mind spinning with fear. What was happening? Had Derek broken into her house? As she reached the bottom of the stairs, Edith's worst fears were confirmed. The front window had been shattered, glass scattered across the floor, and the front door was hanging open. Her hands flew to her mouth, her heart hammering in her chest as she realized what had happened. Derek had been here. Her eyes scanned the room, and that's when she saw a large rock, lying in the middle of the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer, her knees trembling beneath her. The rock was wrapped in a piece of paper, held together by a rubber band. With shaking hands, Edith bent down and picked it up. She carefully unwrapped the paper, her heart pounding in her ears as she unfolded it. The words, scrawled in dark, angry letters, sent a chill down her spine. "You think you can take them away from me? This isn't over." Edith's hands shook as she stared at the note, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Derek had done this. He had broken into her home, her sanctuary, and left this threat behind. He was furious, and now it seemed he was coming for her. She stood frozen in place, her mind spinning with fear and disbelief. This was worse than she had imagined. Derek wasn't going to let Rachel and the girls go not without a fight. And now he had turned his anger toward Edith. Tears welled in her eyes as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She had always been so careful, so cautious, but now she was the target of a dangerous man's wrath. She had helped Rachel escape, and now Derek wanted revenge. But Edith wasn't going to let him scare her. She had faced many challenges in her life losing Richard, living alone, the quiet isolation of her later years. But this was different. This was a threat she couldn't ignore. She had to take action. With trembling hands, Edith picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her voice shook as she explained what had happened: the broken window, the rock, the threatening note. The operator assured her that officers would be dispatched immediately, and they instructed her to stay inside, lock the doors, and wait for their arrival. As Edith hung up the phone, her heart was still racing. She moved quickly through the house, locking every door and window. She felt a deep sense of violation in her home. The place that had always been her safe haven had been invaded by Derek's anger. She couldn't let this go. She had to protect herself, just as she had protected Rachel and the girls. By the time the police arrived, Edith had steeled herself. She wasn't going to let Derek win. She wasn't going to let him intimidate her into silence. She had seen too many women like Rachel suffer in silence, too afraid to ask for help. Not this time. The officers took photos of the broken window, the rock, and the threatening note. They reassured Edith that they would increase patrols in the neighborhood, keeping an eye on Derek's house and her own. They promised to take the threat seriously, but Edith could tell by the look in their eyes that they knew this was a delicate situation. Derek hadn't made a direct threat of violence, just a menacing warning, but it was enough to make them concerned for Edith's safety. As they left, promising to follow up, Edith stood in the quiet of her kitchen, her hands still shaking. She knew she had done the right thing by calling the police, but the fear lingered, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't over. Derek had made that clear. But Edith wasn't backing down. In the days that followed the break-in, Edith tried to regain a sense of normalcy, but it was difficult. Her home, once a sanctuary, now felt exposed and vulnerable. Every creak, every distant sound outside made her heart race, her nerves constantly on edge. But she refused to give in to the fear. She had to stay strong, not just for herself, but for Rachel and the girls. She had called Rachel to tell her what had happened. The conversation had been difficult, filled with emotion, fear, and guilt. Rachel was devastated to hear that Derek had turned his anger toward Edith. She blamed herself, even though Edith tried to reassure her that it was her fault. "I never wanted this for you," Rachel had said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You've done so much for us, and now he's targeting you. I'm so sorry." "Rachel, this isn't your fault," Edith had said firmly. "Derek is the one to blame. Not you." "Not me." "He's angry because you left, but that's his problem, not ours." Rachel had promised to stay in touch, but Edith could hear the fear in her voice. She knew that Rachel was struggling to adjust to life in the shelter, trying to rebuild her life while keeping one eye over her shoulder, constantly afraid that Derek would find them. In the meantime, Edith wasn't alone. The officers had been true to their word, patrolling the neighborhood more frequently, and Edith had installed new locks on her doors and windows. But despite the added security, the sense of vulnerability lingered. A few days after the break-in, Edith received a surprise visit from someone she hadn't expected, one of her neighbors from down the street, Karen Bellamy. Karen was a bit younger than Edith, in her 70s, and though they had exchanged pleasantries over the years, they had never been particularly close. When Karen knocked on Edith's door, she seemed hesitant, almost nervous, but there was a determined glint in her eye that Edith hadn't seen before. "Edith, I heard about what happened," Karen said, stepping inside the house after Edith invited her in. "The whole neighborhood's been talking. I just wanted to check on you, see how you're holding up." Edith smiled softly, grateful for the unexpected kindness. "I'm managing," she said, though her voice lacked its usual warmth. "It's been difficult, but I'm getting through it." Karen nodded, her face softening with sympathy. "I can't imagine how scary that must have been. That man next door to Riki always gave me a bad feeling. The way he looked at people, the way he carried himself. I'm not surprised he'd do something like this." Edith raised an eyebrow, surprised by Karen's bluntness. "You noticed it too." Karen nodded. "Oh, absolutely. And you're not the only one who thought so. A few of the other neighbors, Margaret, Nancy, even Bill from across the street, they've all said the same thing. There's something off about him. We've all been worried about Rachel and those girls." Edith felt a pang of relief. For so long, she had felt like she was fighting this battle alone. But hearing that others had noticed the same warning signs made her feel less isolated. "I've been so worried about Rachel," Edith admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "She's at the shelter now, but I don't know what's going to happen. And now that Derek's targeting me, I just don't know what to do." Karen's expression grew serious. "Well, you're not alone, Edith. I want you to know that. None of us on this street want to see you go through this by yourself. In fact, Margaret and I were talking yesterday, and we've come up with a plan." "A plan?" Edith asked, tilting her head in curiosity. Karen smiled, her eyes twinkling with determination. "Yes, a plan. We're going to start a neighborhood watch. Well, keep an eye on each other's houses. Make sure nothing like this happens again. If Derek so much as sets foot near your home, we'll know about it, and we'll call the police immediately." Edith's heart swelled with gratitude. The idea of a neighborhood watch hadn't even occurred to her, but now that Karen had suggested it, it made perfect sense. With more eyes on the street, Derek wouldn't be able to intimidate her or anyone else without being caught. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," Edith said, feeling a renewed sense of hope. "Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate it." Karen smiled warmly, reaching out to squeeze Edith's hand. "We're a community, Edith, and we take care of our own. Don't worry, we've got your back." As Karen left, promising to organize a meeting with the other neighbors later in the week, Edith felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in days, she didn't feel so alone. She wasn't facing this battle by herself. She had allies, people who cared about her and were willing to stand by her side. Derek might have thought he could intimidate her, but he was wrong. Edith wasn't going to let fear control her life. She had fought too hard to protect Rachel and the girls, and now she had a whole community behind her, ready to fight back. Together, they would stand strong. And together, they would make sure that Derek couldn't hurt anyone ever again. The days following Karen's visit passed in a blur of activity. The neighborhood watch was officially organized, and soon Edith's quiet street was buzzing with a sense of unity and purpose. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves were now actively involved, checking in on each other, keeping a close eye on the goings-on in the neighborhood, and making sure that Derek had no chance to cause any more trouble. It was a far cry from the lonely, disconnected street that Edith had once known. For the first time in years, she felt a renewed sense of community. She felt that they were all in this together, that they could protect each other. And knowing that her neighbors had her back gave Edith a sense of peace she hadn't felt since Rachel and the girls had left. But even with the added security, Edith couldn't shake the feeling that something was still looming like a dark cloud hanging over the street. Derek hadn't made another move since the break-in, but the silence from his house was unnerving. It felt calm before a storm, and Edith had learned to trust her instincts. Derek wasn't done. One late afternoon, as Edith sat in her garden, pruning the last of the roses before the cooler weather set in, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Derek's car had pulled into the driveway next door. He stepped out, looking disheveled, angry. His movements were jerky, erratic, and Edith could see that something was different about him today, something more dangerous. Edith's heart began to race as she watched him stalk toward her house, his expression set in a grim line. This wasn't like the last time. There was no shouting, no dramatic entrance, just a cold, calculated determination in his eyes that made Edith's stomach churn with fear. Before she could even think about retreating into her house, Derek was at her garden gate, his tall frame looming over her like a shadow. "You think you've won." Derek's voice was low, almost a growl, as he stepped closer, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can take them away from me, and I'm just going to let it go." Edith's breath caught in her throat, but she refused to back down. She had come too far to let him intimidate her now. She straightened her spine, meeting his gaze with steady resolve. "They're not yours to control anymore, Derek," she said, her voice firm but calm. "Rachel and the girls are free from you. You can't hurt them anymore." Derek's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment Edith thought he might lash out. But instead, he took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know what you've done, Edith. You've crossed a line." Edith's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "The only line that's been crossed is yours, Derek. You hurt those girls. You hurt Rachel. And now you're trying to hurt me. But it's over? The police know what you've done. They're watching you. We're all watching you." Derek's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with anger. "You think I care about the police? You think I care about your little neighborhood watch? None of that's going to stop me." Edith's fear deepened, but she knew she couldn't let him see it. She had to stand her ground. "You're wrong, Derek. You're not invincible. You can't bully people into submission forever." Just as Derek's hand twitched toward her, there was a shout from across the street. "Hey, leave her alone!" Edith turned to see Bill, her neighbor from across the street, standing on his front porch, a phone in his hand, his face filled with anger. Behind him, other neighbors had begun to step out of their houses, their eyes fixed on Derek. "You heard her," Bill shouted again, holding up his phone. "The police are on their way, Derek. You've lost." Derek's eyes darted around, realizing for the first time that the entire street was watching him. His bravado faltered, his shoulders tensing as he took in the growing crowd of neighbors, all standing together in a show of solidarity. For a moment, it seemed like Derek might lash out, might do something reckless. But then slowly, the fight drained out of him. His fists unclenched, his shoulders slumped, and with one last look at Edith filled with hatred and resentment, he turned and stormed back to his car. The street was silent as Derek sped away, his tires screeching against the pavement. Edith's breath came in shallow gasps, her heart still racing from the confrontation. She stood there for a moment, frozen, until Bill crossed the street and stood beside her. "You okay, Edith?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Edith nodded, though her legs still felt shaky. "I'm okay," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thanks to all of you." Bill smiled warmly, giving her a reassuring nod. "We're not going to let him hurt you, Edith. Not now, not ever." Edith's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of fear, they were tears of gratitude. She had been afraid for so long, but now, standing here with her neighbors by her side, she felt a renewed sense of strength. She wasn't alone. In the days following the final confrontation with Derek, the neighborhood watch remained vigilant, but the sense of fear that had once gripped Cedar Street began to dissipate. Derek hadn't returned, and Edith had received word from the police that he was being closely monitored. They had issued a restraining order, preventing Derek from coming within a certain distance of Edith's home or the shelter where Rachel and the girls were staying. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough to give Edith peace of mind for now. Rachel called regularly, checking in to see how Edith was doing and updating her on their progress. The shelter had helped her find legal representation, and she was working toward securing full custody of the girls and filing for divorce from Derek. It was a long, difficult road, but Rachel was determined to keep moving forward. "The girls are adjusting," Rachel said during one phone call, her voice sounding stronger, more confident. "They're starting to sleep better, and we're getting used to our new routine. It's still hard sometimes, but I feel like we're finally free." Edith smiled, her heart swelling with pride for Rachel. She had come so far, and though there were still challenges ahead, Edith knew that Rachel had the strength to face them. "I'm so proud of you," Edith said softly. "You're doing such a good job, Rachel. You and the girls are going to be just fine." Rachel hesitated for a moment, then her voice softened. "We couldn't have done it without you, Edith. You saved us." I'll never be able to thank you enough for everything you've done." Tears welled in Edith's eyes, and she wiped them away with a smile. "You're family now, Rachel, and family takes care of each other." As Edith hung up the phone, a sense of calm settled over her. She had faced her fears, stood up to Derek, and helped Rachel and the girls escape a dangerous situation. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Her home, once a place of quiet solitude, had become a symbol of strength and resilience. And her neighbors' sons, strangers, had become a community, united by a shared sense of purpose. Life on Cedar Street would never be the same again, but that was okay. Because now it is filled with hope, connection, and the promise of a better future. Edith smiled as she stepped out into her garden, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the roses. She knelt down, her hands gently tending to the flowers, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingertips. There was still work to be done, but now she knew she wasn't doing it alone. In the weeks that followed Derek's final confrontation, a new sense of peace settled over Cedar Street. The neighborhood watch remained vigilant, but the need for constant worry had lessened as Derek's presence faded from their lives. He hadn't returned, and the restraining order kept him at a safe distance from Edith's home and from the shelter where Rachel and the girls were living. Edith found herself breathing easier with each passing day, the weight of fear slowly lifting from her shoulders. One crisp autumn morning, as Edith was pruning her roses, she heard the familiar ring of her phone from inside the house. She wiped her hands on her gardening apron and hurried to answer it, her heart lifting when she saw Rachel's name on the caller ID. "Rachel, it's so good to hear from you," Edith said, a smile spreading across her face as she held the phone to her ear. "Hi, Edith," Rachel replied, her voice filled with warmth. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all, dear. Just tending to the garden. How are you and the girls doing?" Rachel let out a small sigh, though it was one of relief rather than stress. "We're doing really well, actually. The girls are starting to settle in at school, and they're making new friends. We've been staying at the shelter for a while now, but I've been working with a caseworker. And, well, we found a place. It's a small apartment, but it's ours." Edith's heart swelled with joy at the news. "Rachel, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. I couldn't have done it without your help, Edith." "Really? I mean it. You were there for me when I didn't know what to do. I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You've already thanked me more than enough, Rachel," Edith said gently. "I'm just glad you and the girls are safe and moving forward." "We are," Rachel agreed, her voice steady. "We still have some hard days, but we're starting to rebuild. I'm learning how to live without looking over my shoulder all the time. The girls, they've been through so much, but I think they're going to be okay." Edith felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she wiped it away with a smile. "You're an incredible mother, Rachel. You've given them the chance to have a better life, and that's the most important thing." "Thank you," Rachel whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I wanted to ask, would you like to come visit us when we're settled into the apartment? The girls miss you, and I'd love for you to see our new place." "I'd love that," Edith replied without hesitation. "I can't wait to see how far you've come." After they said their goodbyes, Edith stood in the quiet of her kitchen, a deep sense of pride and peace settling over her. She had been part of something important, helping Rachel and her daughters escape a dangerous situation and start a new life. Knowing that they were safe and thriving gave Edith a sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in a long time. But Edith also knew that healing wasn't just for Rachel and the girls. She too had been deeply affected by everything that had happened. For so long, Edith had lived in a world of solitude, wrapped in the memories of her past life with Richard. But now she realized that she had the power to create new connections, to make a difference in the lives of others. Her small, quiet world had expanded in ways she never could have predicted. A few weeks later, Edith stood in front of the door to Rachel's new apartment, her heart racing with anticipation. She held a basket filled with homemade cookies and a small potted plant, a housewarming gift for Rachel and the girls. As she knocked on the door, she couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and pride. Rachel had taken such brave steps toward building a new life for herself and her daughters, and Edith was eager to see the progress they had made. The door opened, and there stood Rachel, her face lighting up with a wide smile. "Edith, you made it." "Of course I did," Edith replied warmly, stepping inside and hugging Rachel. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the warmth and light that Edith had come to associate with Rachel. The walls were adorned with colorful artwork, some drawn by Lily and Ivy, and the space felt alive with the energy of a family building something new. Edith smiled as she took it all in, her heart swelling with pride for Rachel's resilience. "Look who's here!" Rachel called out. And moments later, Lily and Ivy came bounding into the room, their faces bright with excitement. "Grandma Edith!" they exclaimed in unison, rushing toward her and wrapping their arms around her. Edith laughed, bending down to hug the girls. "Oh, my dears, it's so good to see you." "We missed you," Ivy said, her voice small but filled with warmth. "Can you stay for dinner?" "I wouldn't dream of leaving before dinner," Edith replied, her heart swelling with affection for the girls. As they settled into the living room, Rachel brought out a pot of tea, and the four of them spent the afternoon catching up, laughing, and sharing stories. The girls proudly showed Edith their artwork, and Rachel talked about how they were adjusting to their new school and making friends. "They're doing so well," Rachel said, her voice filled with relief and pride. "I wasn't sure how they would handle all the changes, but they've been so strong. I'm so proud of them." "You should be proud of yourself too," Edith said gently. "You've created a safe, loving home for them. That's everything." Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of gratitude. "I still can't believe we made it. There were times when I thought we'd never get out, but now we have a chance at a real life." As the afternoon turned into evening, the conversation grew deeper, and Edith and Rachel found themselves reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few months. There had been so much pain, fear, and uncertainty, but now there was also hope. They had made it through the storm, and now they were standing on the other side, ready to rebuild their lives. "I never thought I'd feel free," Rachel admitted quietly, her voice heavy with emotion. "But now I wake up every morning knowing that I'm safe, that my girls are safe. And that's everything." Edith reached out and took Rachel's hand, squeezing it gently. "You deserve this peace, Rachel. You and the girls deserve all the happiness in the world." Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "And you deserve it too, Edith. You've been through so much yourself. You've given us a new start, and I hope you know how much that means to me." Edith smiled, her heart full. "We've given each other a new start." Later that evening, after dinner, and one last round of hugs from Lily and Ivy, Edith said her goodbyes and made her way back to her own home. As she walked down the quiet street, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Life had changed in ways she never could have predicted, but it was better, now richer, fuller, and filled with new connections. Rachel and the girls had become like family to her, and Edith knew that their bond would only grow stronger as they continued to support one another in the days ahead. As the autumn leaves began to fall and the air turned crisp, Edith found herself spending more time in her garden, reflecting on the past few months. So much had changed, not just for Rachel and the girls, but for Edith as well. Her life, once quiet and isolated, had been transformed by the relationships she had built and the strength she had discovered within herself. But with that transformation came a deeper understanding of the weight she had been carrying for so long: grief, the loneliness, the sense of being left behind. Richard's death had left a hole in Edith's life, one that she had tried to fill with routine and solitude. But now, with Rachel and the girls in her life, Edith realized that she didn't have to carry that weight alone anymore. One afternoon, as Edith sat in the garden with a cup of tea, she found herself thinking about Richard. She missed him every day, missed his laugh, his warmth, the way he had always made her feel safe and loved. But for the first time in a long time, Edith felt a sense of peace when she thought of him, peace in knowing that he would have been proud of her for everything she had done to help Rachel and the girls. As she sipped her tea, Edith decided it was time to visit Richard's grave. She hadn't been in a while, and she felt a strong pull to go to tell him about everything that had happened, about the new life she had found after all these years. The next day, Edith drove to the cemetery where Richard was buried. The drive was quiet, the fall colors painting the landscape in shades of gold and red. When she arrived, Edith made her way to Richard's headstone, a small smile on her face as she placed a bouquet of fresh roses at his grave. "Hello, love," she said softly, her voice filled with affection. "It's been a while, but I've been busy. I have so much to tell you." For the next hour, Edith sat by Richard's grave, telling him about Rachel, about the girls, about everything that had happened since they had moved into the neighborhood. She talked about how she had found new strength within herself, how she had made new friends, and how she had learned that it was never too late to make a difference in someone's life. "I think you'd be proud of me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I know I've still got a lot of life left to live, and I'm going to make the most of it. I'll carry your love with me, always." As Edith stood to leave, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She knew that Richard was still with her, in spirit, and that his love would continue to guide her in the days ahead. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. As the winter holidays approached, Cedar Street came alive with the warm glow of twinkling lights and the festive spirit of the season. Edith, who had once dreaded the long, lonely winter months, now found herself filled with a sense of anticipation and joy. The neighborhood had changed so much in the past few months, and Edith felt more connected to her community than ever before. Rachel and the girls had invited Edith to spend Christmas with them in their new apartment, and Edith had gladly accepted. It was a far cry from the quiet, solitary holidays she had spent in years past, and she was looking forward to celebrating with people she cared about. On Christmas Eve, Edith arrived at Rachel's apartment with a basket full of gifts and homemade treats. The girls greeted her at the door, their faces bright with excitement, and Edith couldn't help but laugh as they pulled her inside. "We've been waiting for you," Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. Mom made hot chocolate. Edith's heart swelled with affection as she followed the girls into the cozy living room where Rachel was waiting with a warm smile. The apartment was decorated with twinkling lights and a small Christmas tree, and the air was filled with the comforting scent of cinnamon and pine. "Welcome, Edith," Rachel said, hugging her tightly. "We're so glad you're here." "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else," Edith replied, her voice full of warmth. As they sat together by the fire, sipping hot chocolate and exchanging stories, Edith felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what she had been missing for so long, a sense of connection, of belonging, of family. The evening passed in a blur of laughter, conversation, and warmth. The girls opened their presents with wide-eyed excitement, and Edith marveled at how far they had come since the dark days of living under Derek's control. They were happy, healthy, and full of life, and Edith knew that Rachel had done an incredible job of creating a safe, loving home for them. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Rachel and Edith sat together by the fire, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past year. "It feels like a lifetime ago," Rachel said quietly, her eyes focused on the flickering flames. "Sometimes I still can't believe we made it out." "But we did." "You did," Edith corrected gently. "You found the strength to leave, and now you and the girls have a bright future ahead of you." Rachel smiled, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Edith. You were there when I needed someone the most, and I'll never forget that." Edith reached out and took Rachel's hand, squeezing it gently. "We've been there for each other, and we'll keep being there, no matter what comes next." As they sat together in the quiet of the night, Edith felt a deep sense of peace settling over her. The storm was over, and now it was time to move forward to embrace the future with open arms, knowing that they had all found the strength to survive and thrive. And in that moment, Edith knew that everything would be all right. Thank you for following along with Edith's emotional and inspiring journey. If you found this story moving or relatable, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more powerful stories like this. We'll be bringing you more heartwarming tales of resilience, community, and the strength of the human spirit. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when new content is available. We value your feedback, So if you enjoyed this story, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community, and stay tuned for more stories that remind us all that no matter how hard things get, we are never truly alone.